Hi, everyone. We're so excited to be here with you tonight to celebrate Valerie June's newly released book, Maps for the Modern World. And tonight's conversation will be co-hosted with Adia Victoria.
Hey, y'all.
Adia Victoria is a Southern Gothic blues poet, musician, and storyteller from South Carolina, based in Nashville. Her latest album, Silences, was co-produced by the National's Aaron Dessner and released in 2019 on Canvasback Records. She's the host of Call and Response, a podcast on Sonos sound system that leans into the blues to explore the communal spirit of music making and listening. When not making art, she dedicates her life to her family, silence, brooding in Paris, and mothering her 4 cats, Bot, Dot, Nancy, and Shelby Foot. Welcome, Adia.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me. I have to say this is a huge blessing, just to be able to share space with y'all. Full disclosure, I have not met Valerie yet. I'm, like most of you guys, a huge fan, and I'm in awe of her brilliance. And I hope after the pandemic, she and I get to meet up for some Black Girl magic. Thank you for those kind words about me, Amanda, and let me just go ahead and do the same. Amanda Lucidon is an award-winning documentarian, author, and teaching artist. She served as an official White House photographer for First Lady Michelle Obama and President Obama. She is one of only a few female White House photographers in history. Lucidon is the author of Chasing Light and Reach Higher. Amanda is also the co-founder of Grounded, a Memphis-based organization that combines art and mindfulness practices to reduce gun violence and counter the impacts of childhood trauma. Valerie June is also a member of the Grounded team, working together to harness the power of creativity and transformation. And I'm going to turn it back to Amanda to bring Valerie into the fold.
Yeah, now that you know a little bit about us and how we know Valerie, we're going to jump into the conversation. And a little later on, we'll ask your questions too. So Valerie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I love you both, and I'm thrilled to be here.
You have a new book, Maps for the Modern World, and a new album, The Moon and Stars, Prescription for Dreamers. So that's so exciting. And we're so grateful for your time for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it. It's a lot to have out in the world, but I feel like after the pandemic, we needed these little seeds of light. And after just everything we went through in the year of 2020, it's been so much. And so I had the book finished and the record finished before the pandemic. So before March of last year, we were mixing in March. And I didn't have the cover art for the book yet. I was still drawing that. But all the poems were in, and Allison, the editor, had checked off and said, yes, it's great, let's send it to print. And we hit those hard times with the coronavirus, and it just needed to be put on hold. And the same thing happened with my record. So I was like, what do I do with this 2020 year? But now I see that it was just a good time for me to rest and rejuvenate and prepare for this amazing storm of light that I'm trying to send out.
Exactly. And it seems like the book and the record came at the perfect time when everyone, we've all been dealing with so much in the past year. So even though it was done before this hit, I mean, it seemed like you're sending those messages to us right when we need them the most. So, you described this book as a laboratory of poetic experiments and the alchemy of life. And I wondered if you could tell us about the title, what it means to you, and what inspired you to create the book.
Well, the title is a title that my amazing literary agent, who you know as well because you introduced me to her, Rachel Vogel, she came up with the title. I could not really settle on a title, and she was like, look, I've read the poems, and I believe that Maps for the Modern World is going to be a great title for this book. And I was like, yeah, it's perfect. It actually fits. And the reason why it fits is because this is not me telling my readers, hey, how to live. It's me reminding everyone that you know the way. You have your own compass. You have your own map, your own blueprint that you were born with. And so we live in these modern times where life is so busy and we're always glued to our phones. And I love my phone and I love my computer. I sleep beside them basically. But how do we connect with the inner world while living in the outer physical world, and especially in these times, which they're so fast and so, technology's moving so swiftly. So
Mhm.
that's kind of why we connected with the title. And yeah, when I think about it being a laboratory of poetic experiments and the alchemy of life, we are all going to hit hard times in our day or in our year or in whatever it might be. I mean, to live is to grow through stones and around, different roadblocks and all of these different things that come along the pathway, reaching a thorn of a rose every once in a while and getting stuck and scraping and bending and twisting and turning and all of that. That's what living is. But how do we take that and how do we become alchemists in our life and shift that energy and use that energy as fuel for something that we wish to see, something that hopefully is a positive thing, because that energy could be used as fuel for negativity as well. But how do we continue a cycle of being, as you so many times have said, a chaser of the light? And so that's why it's a laboratory of experiments. We're all just using our test tubes and our beakers and figuring it out for ourselves,
And when I think of you, I think that you're a dreamer, a visionary, a radiant light, and you're also a really incredibly hard worker. And you've overcome many obstacles to manifest your dreams. And I personally witnessed how you've encouraged young people to build their dreams, through our work at Grounded, even if they only commit to like 10 minutes a day of working towards your dreams and what you love. There's a section in the book called Journeys and Dreams, and you write that dreams sound fluffy and soft like a cotton ball, but dreams are work. Can you talk to us about the importance of dreams and work? And we'd love if you could read one of your favorite poems from this chapter.
Okay. Well, I'll start with saying that last year we lost one of our great dreamers of our time living together. And I know you adore John Lewis as much as I do. And y'all both do. And so we lost him. And as we lost him, and I was watching everything that was happening with systemic racism and injustice across our globe and across the nation and the world, and just seeing all of that, it reminded me of my roots in Memphis, my roots in Tennessee, and Dr. King. Just simply this amazing dreamer. One of the world's greatest dreamers that's ever existed, Dr. King, and him saying that I have a dream. And us still today pushing to see that dream come true. We're still fighting to see just the sweetest thing of people being judged by the content of their character versus the color of their skin. Are you a good person or are you a bad person? Do you have a sweet heart or do you have a rotten heart? And we all have seeds of both all the time, as Sister Peace will say. But in looking at that, I just feel that we need more dreamers in the world. And whatever inspires you to dream personally is important, but also that is just a launching pad for what you dream for humanity. What is your wish and what is your hope for a contribution to humanity? Because I believe every life has a purpose and every life has a gift that they can give to the planet. And the world is not the same when you're gone, it all carries on, but what you have given, those seeds are still unfolding. And so I think all of that's super important, and us tapping into the side of ourselves that allows us to dream, it sparks imagination, it sparks wonder, it sparks beauty. And so when we're able to imagine a new world, a more harmonious world, a more gentle existence for all living beings, a more balanced world and racially just world, when we're able to imagine that and just see it here in the mind's eye first, then it can begin to slowly, it starts to happen. You just don't even know how. But it does start to happen. And dreams are their work, like I've said in the book, but they're also bigger than us. Look at the life of Dr. King. Look at the life of someone like John Lennon, who was also a poet and a musician, who expressed his dreams of having a more beautiful and imagining a more beautiful earth and a more harmonious existence for people. These people were assassinated for what I'm talking about. To dream is a very powerful thing. To dream is a very dangerous thing. And you have got to protect that side of yourself that wishes to dream. It's magical and it's soft and it sounds like clouds and cotton balls. Dreaming, so sweet. But dreaming is fierce. Roll up your sleeves, basically. So, what would I like to read from that part of the book? Let's see. Yeah. I think that the one that I'd like to read, and I'm going to dedicate this, which the poem was written before I even knew she existed, but the poet Amanda Gorman, who is an amazing dreamer, and she is a young person that I respect so much, who is doing with her life what I was describing in saying that we need more dreamers who are willing to live the dream for the world in the way that Dr. King was. I feel she does. And so sometimes your work can feel real heavy. So this poem is called How to Climb a Mountain. And this is the little sewing goddess that I drew. And she is stitching together the fabric of the universe. She's got stars and the moon and galaxies, and she's sewing it together with her dream and work. And she says, I wake up and face my work, which is always larger than me. Then I remember that my job is mostly in the doing, rarely in the outcome. It is through the doing that I can afford to trust each step, ever moving toward my dream. And so each little stitch that you're making in that quilt of life is super, super important. It's a motion towards the dream.
Yeah, I love it.
Thank
I love it.
you.
So I'm on vacation right now in Naples, Florida, and I live with my mother and my sister in Nashville, Tennessee. And I have just been sitting and taking pictures from this book and sending them to my mom and my sister. I'm just like, read this, please, just read it. Like, there's good stuff in here. And I feel like it's like advice that's really watering my soul right now. Like, I feel like you're kind of like a sister, that's like looking over my shoulder and like, hey, just step outside of the rigmarole for a second, there's just something very grounded in the work that you're doing in your writing. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that brings me to my question. So there's a meditative quality to the poems and maps for the modern world that implore the reader to live and locate themselves in the present moment. And I'm thinking in particular of your poem, Can Anyone Remember How We Got Here? Where you write, can we ever really remember the reason we stay where we are? And doesn't the reason we are where we are change as we are where we are? In this poem, it made me pause and reflect on how, before the pandemic, so much of our lives were centered on making plans for a future version of ourselves. And we spend so much of our time and our life trying to launch ourselves out of the present into a non-existent future. So my question for you, Valerie, is how has the pandemic affected the way that you interact with your present self?
Wow. As I have gotten fully vaccinated, I find myself in my mind making plans for the future, and then I slow myself down and I'm like, yeah, I could. That was a nice daydream, but I don't think I need to go 10 billion miles a minute like I was before.
Yeah.
I think those pauses and having a nice rhythm and a balance to my life going forward is super important. And I don't have the best memory. Like I walk in the kitchen and I like turn on the light and I'm like, wait a minute, why did I come in here? And I think about that when I think about being in a body and being on earth. I was raised in Tennessee in the church, and you're told that you are, Adam and Eve and the story of how we got here. And I like that story, but I also like to sit with the story of how did we really get here? Like, is there another way we got here? And I like to think about how I don't remember what I was doing when I lived in Memphis 10 years ago to detail.
Mm.
So, of course, I wouldn't remember what I was doing before I got here because
Yeah.
that's just the way it is. We don't
Mm.
remember every single thing. Now, I remember I was born, and I do get flashes sometimes of what I think was my birth or what I think was before my birth, but all of that is just a nice space, I think, for people to go when you're trying to encourage them to dream. Because if we can get outside of the everyday like heaviness of life and the weight of it and paying the bills and stuff, and we can sit in the moment of just levitating and like there is nothing really pressing at this exact time, and we just sit there, well, then all kinds of ideas and different things and doors and visions start popping up. And that's how that space is like the soil for creating a new plan or a new wish.
Mm. I love how you say the soil, like in so many of these poems, like the natural world kind of speaks through you. And I think of so many people during the pandemic that started gardening and cooking and just like using their hands in more ways that like our modern world kind of cut us off from. And I think that slowing down and just like watching something grow is just very, very spiritual and quite poetic as well.
I definitely love plants. I have a plant problem. You have a cat problem. I have
Yeah.
a plant problem. And these are
Yeah.
not bad things. These are
It ain't
good.
no problem. It ain't no problem.
Yeah, I have a poem in here that talks about how much I love my problems. So they're okay to have.
Well, I want to ask you another question. So, speaking about hands, you are a badass guitarist as well. So, in Earth, in your poems, Maps and Other Worlds, you talk about the transcendent power of the everyday world around us. And so, I'm curious how the blues have played a role in transcending the strife of everyday life for you.
Wow. Well, first of all, the blues is my education in being black, really, because
Mm.
I never wanted to read any of the books on slavery. I didn't want to read anything from W.E.B. Du Bois. I didn't want to read anything like any heavy literature on slavery at all. I didn't want to. I have now, but I just wanted to stay in this place where my heart was gentle and it didn't have it. I have the heaviness in my roots, like I know that it's in my blood, and so I wanted to know other worlds. And so there's a poem in here called "Slave Mind Blues" because the more you know about the history and the pain and the past, if you don't keep your heart open, it can darken your spirit and it can weigh on your soul and it can stop you from creating a more harmonious world. And so you want to transcend that slave mind blues. And the way I did it was the way I do it is I listen to the blues and I get educated on the real feeling that my people had when they came back in at the end of the day from working in the fields picking the cotton, or after a person was beaten. In some of the stories that Frederick Douglass says in his book, like those are hard stories to listen to or to read. But when I listen to a singer like Fred McDowell or John Hurt or Charlie Patton, when I listen to them sing that, or Ma Rainey, Memphis Minute, I hear these moans, I hear these groans, and I feel it, and I know that's all the education I need. Like, I mean, I do think that some people need to really dive in, and like there needs to be more education around the history of what we've been through as a people. But like the blues educated my ass. I'm just gonna put it like that. In a way that no other thing can.
Yes. Love that.
Valerie, you're a woman of many talents, singer, songwriter, musician, poet, author, gardener, and the list goes on. I knew you were working on this book, but I had no idea that you were doing the illustrations too. So that's a side of you I didn't know about. So I wanted to ask you, is this a new creative interest, or have you always been interested in drawing? And talk to us about your process of creating the images to go along with the poems.
Surprise! I love art. My mother is a painter, and my mother is pretty incredible. She can do anything, like build a house, or like she sews, she does everything. She's just the inspiration for me when it comes to being able to just look at something and say, well, I think I can do that, and I'm going to try it. And so growing up, I was born into a house where there was an easel, there was oil paint all over the place, there was painting, a painting of my father, a painting of my brothers, a painting. She painted the family. She painted still lives. And she was into photography, and she still is with these different things I'm saying. And so I grew up with an artist in my life, and that made me want to draw when I was little. I was in church, and I'd be like, well, I got an hour. I'm just going to sit here and draw this guy in front of me and that woman over there, and oh, what do you say about God? Yeah, I like that too, and I'll draw it all, you know. And so I used to just do that side of drawing and love that. But then when I moved to Memphis, I wanted to go to Memphis College of Art, but there was some issues with the tax papers of my family, and I couldn't get a scholarship. So I ended up working jobs, and I was choosing between music and art. And I decided to just do music because I could afford to just work and book some open mics. But art was always something I wanted to do. And so I put canvas up at my apartment in Memphis, and I'd work on a painting for like 3 years and then sell it at the Cooper Young Festival, which is a festival there in Memphis. But I would just put the canvas up and work on it. Whenever I came home from work and I wasn't tired and I had the inspiration, I would add something. I didn't put pressure on myself to create. And so with this book, the way it happened is I had the poems and I had a couple of drawings, but when I met Rachel, I was like, I've got to just do a drawing for every single poem. So there was some pressure there to finish these illustrations. And so there were color pencils all over the place, and crayons and markers, and my boyfriend would come home and he'd just be like, what's going on? For like maybe about 6 or 7 months it took me on that part. And I finished the illustrations at Hedgebrook Writers Retreat out in Washington State. And the reason why it took so long is I had them and I turned them in, but they were all done by hand, and everything's digital now, so my black writing or drawing was super light, and when they were going to print it, they wouldn't be able to make it out, so I had to go back through and draw every single line again. But now I have an iPad and I can do digital art, but I've really loved I love the feeling of a #2 pencil, and I love the smell of paper and different thicknesses of papers and stuff like that. I have a lot of art stuff that I collect just because it smells good, or I like the color, or I'm gonna do something with that one day.
I think it's a great lesson of, you don't have to pick, there's a time where you're picking between art and music, and, here you are sort of sharing it all because it's all parts of you, and while it might seem new that you have a book of poems, we know you've been doing poetry for a long time. And now I know about your illustrations in church, so, thinking about starting new things and sharing new things, like recently you started sharing your meditation practice with your fans on social media. So I wondered if doing new things, does it excite you? Does it scare you? Or a little bit of both? And what advice would you have for someone in the audience who may be wanting to try something new, but hesitant for some reason or another?
Wow. Doing new things is very scary. I would not have the courage to share meditations if it wasn't for working with Grounded and Sister Peace. Because what Sister Peace does is she's a Buddhist monk who leads meditations, and they're not very long on the calls that I've done with Grounded. But she'll also encourage like the teenagers that we'd be working with to do it, or sometimes she would ask me to do it. And it gave me courage to share it, that side of myself, which I wouldn't have had before because I wrote a poem that's not in this book, but I posted it. It's called It's Not Meditate or Pray, It's Meditate and Pray. But I had a hard time sharing the spiritual side of myself with the world because I know everyone has their own path, and that there are many paths to the way that you need to live the best life. And I just didn't want to project my belief onto anyone. But the way Sister P shares it, it's not about your belief. It's about connecting with your inner self, and it's about you having your experience with your light. And that could be anything. It can be smelling a flower, it can be taking a swim, it can be camping, whatever, So, um, so yeah, doing new things is super scary, and I usually need a guide or someone will come into my life who helps me along the way.
Mm-hmm. And your words also your words also give people confidence. So I was wondering if maybe there was a poem that you could share that might inspire courage and confidence in all of us to try something new.
Okay. Well, what I think is the one I want to read is Little Worlds. And the reason why is because when we're going to try something new, it seems so big and it seems so unreachable and unattainable. But if you break it down into small bits, then you can see how the magic happens. So Little Worlds is simply, be enchanted by the little worlds. A plant, a wall, a door, a shadow cast, because it means there's light to help you soar. Thank you.
Ooh, I love that. I love the way that at the end of that, it was kind of like a little gift. It was like a aha moment of, if there's the shadow present, that means that there's light. And I love that, you're able to navigate both of those worlds of lightness and darkness, but not in a way where they're like opposed to one another, more like they make the other possible. Like you can't have the light without the darkness. That's beautiful. I love it. Okay, so I want to ask you a question. In your poem, 34 years, that one really talked to me because I am 34. And I think about the issue of aging in our culture. Like, I feel like something happened when I turned 30. I just started buying serums and ointments for my face. And I was just like, why am I suddenly so afraid of, being old? And I thought about the issue of aging in our culture, especially for women. And after 30, you're perceived differently by the dominant culture. So I'm curious your relationship with aging and finding peace and beauty within yourself in a culture with such a narrow and often brutal idea of beauty. And that's so externally focused. What was your thinking when you wrote 34 years?
I had lost my father, and my mother and father, their time together, she took such great care of him, you know, in the last 3 years of his life. And it was amazing to see because they had an up and down kind of, always together, but they were up and down, you know, at each other sometimes and together and happy other times. And so I looked at their relationship from 34 years later of me being alive, and I was just like, you know, there were times I'm sure where she wanted to leave or he wanted to leave, but there was beauty in them staying and them honoring their commitment of marriage to each other. And and so the beauty to me, I love when I see, like, I was in the Navajo Nation in near the Grand Canyon, and we stopped, and there was this beautiful older woman, and she was selling jewelry she made, and she had wrinkles where they were just like chiseled, and it was so gorgeous. And I see it, and I love also like the hair of someone like Emmylou Harris, where it's totally gray, and I just love that. And I think I love old things in general, instruments that are old, records, anything, you know, like I just gravitate towards old things a lot of times, old clothes, vintage clothes, and things. So I think, like, we all, like, there's beauty to aging, and I don't really necessarily fear it, but I think if you can age and you can keep your heart light and your heart playful and childlike, then it doesn't matter what you look like. You've reached just this place of sterling existence. And so I think that's kind of the goal, and that's how I view aging. And yeah, before this call, I was like, I took a shower and I put on my face cream, and I was like, I'm going to be 40 next year. Maybe I should get some more face cream out of this jar and slather it on. But then I was like, you know what? I look like I look. So, you know,
Yes.
there's freedom in not having to try anymore.
Yeah. Well, you look gorgeous, and I would never think that you were 39, black don't crack. You're just beautiful.
Thank
You
you.
look good. So I'm gonna ask you one more question, if I could. Um, there seems to be like a spirit of releasing and acceptance throughout the poems and maps for the modern world. And you write about releasing a lot about our releasing our desire for control and external acceptance in favor of embracing the unknown. And I love in your poem, A Light Beyond, the ways that you subvert the Western fear of death and view grief as a way to explore another side of our being. So my question for you is, what advice would you give to a society that is currently facing such monumental loss? How do we best grieve our past lives?
That's a huge question.
Sorry, I don't mean to get all like morose during the cocktail hour.
Wow. Yeah, where is it? The moment that we look at death and we just realize that it's always been there, it's always been with us, and same as life, and it's a transition, and it's an opportunity to create something different. And I think we can sit with it and let it teach us its lessons versus trying to push on through it, because That the one you're talking about, A Light Beyond, the little goddess is walking to the door and she's going up on the steps because you have to, because when something's passed, you've lost something, a person in particular, you can't, you can act like you're not going to cry. You can act like you're going to get through it, that it's just going to just fade away and you won't have a hard time with grief, but it's going to hit you and it's going to knock you over. And when it does, you can walk up on the porch and you can open the door. And I think that there's always an opportunity for light in that moment. Like there's always an opportunity to grow. And they say when people are making the transition that they see a white light or they see a light and they move towards it. And so I think that light is always there, even when you're in a body. And so you have the opportunity when someone passes to go closer to that light, to open your heart more, to grow, to see beyond the heaviness or limitations of the physical world. And so I think that's what we got to do. We got to be like, yeah, we have so much to overcome here. We have so many like shifts of consciousness that need to happen on the earth. But if we can just keep stepping towards that light and keep seeing the light beyond the heaviness of the moment, then that's what we're going to create, because you create what you focus on. So that's it. That's what I think.
Yes, preach, church. Yep.
Valerie, before we move into the questions from the audience, is there one of your favorite poems or something that you just feel is a great time to share one of your poems?
I like the poem Giving Back with Gratitude. And she's planting seeds, which is the perfect time for seeds to be planted because we're in spring. And she says, I came to bask in the sun, to see my mother smile, to dream, see manifested. But while I'm here and thus so far invested, I guess I'll roll up my sleeves and kneel down on my knees, planting flowers and seeds so earth will know that I have blessed it.
I love that. And you actually picked my favorite one too. So thank you for reading that for us. So our first question from the audience comes from Lauren in Nashville, Tennessee, who says, hey, Valerie, I'm from Memphis too. Would you say your geographical upbringing inspired your love of music?
I do believe that being from West Tennessee, between those two powerful music towns of Nashville and Memphis, it was no way I could get away without loving music. Plus, my father was a music promoter, so I had music all around me.
So my turn to take one from the field. All right. I guess we're going to stay in Tennessee. So Lee from Burleson, Tennessee asks, who would you love to collaborate with next? And what is the best advice you've been given? So that's a 2-point question.
Ooh. Well, I would love to collaborate with you. So we need to write a song together. And or I could sing on something, or if you want a really piercing, distinct voice, let me know.
Yeah, let's shred on something.
Oh yeah, that would be really fun. So I think we're due for a collaboration, and just a song or anything, just sharing a stage or something of that sort would be really fun.
I'd be much obliged.
And what was the other side of the question?
The second part was, what is the best advice you've been given?
Well, I guess it's something like, that's really hard because I feel like I've been given so much good advice. about so many different things. Like, for example, in relationships, Gran always says, you got to keep the respect for each other. If you don't keep the respect for each other, then it's not going to work. And I think about that, and when she first said it, I'm like, what does that mean? Respect for each other? Like, what does it really mean? and I think she's right. And I think that translates to how we treat each other on the planet too. Like, if we have respect for the fact that we don't agree, then we can move on. But if we don't have respect, then it's going to break apart. So I think that's pretty good advice, Gran's advice.
Grand's advice is always great.
Yeah.
So the next question is Naya from Charlotte, North Carolina. And she says, what advice would you give an 18-year-old girl who has just dipped her toe into the real world?
18. Well, first of all, realize you are so young and anything is possible. There are endless possibilities. I would say I would write down every possible dream you see in your mind's eye right now. Just write them all down. And just like look at them on the page. And then just run your hand up and down the page every other day and be like, that one. And just keep choosing ones that you want to do and do them. And just commit to that and live it with joy. And that's really it.
18, that's a baby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I would tell her, don't make any permanent mistakes.
I like that too.
Yeah, keep moving. Okay, so this next question is from Erica from Atlanta, Georgia. And she asked, what was your favorite thing about writing both books and music?
Wow. Music and books. Yes, I know exactly what my favorite thing is. My favorite thing is being in connection with the muse. Like, I don't know where they come from, but the worlds that I get to go to with them is somewhere anyone would enjoy, and you should go. And that's what I think creativity gives us. It gives us access to these other little adventurous places to be.
And the next question is from Chris from Denver, Colorado. Asks, did you learn anything about yourself while writing this book?
No. Yes, I've learned so many things about myself while writing it. Like, one thing, I learned was that maybe what I would like to write next is something similar to the essays that are in the book. And learned that about myself. And also I also learned that, like I was saying with the list of things you wish to do from the age of 18, you would also be able to decide to keep some of those for yourself. Like, there are songs that are just for me, or for when I'm cooking around the house, and if you're not there, you're not going to hear it. Or like for when I'm gardening, or when I'm with my mom, or when I'm with my friends. Some songs aren't for the world. Some poems aren't for the world. Some things just aren't for the world. So I learned that.
I love that. I think that's so wise as an artist to keep that boundary. Not everything's for the world's consumption. Some things are just for you. And that's something that I've had to learn over the course of quarantine. Like, you can entertain anybody, but can you keep your own self company? I love I actually wrote that down in my little journal here. So that was a really good answer. Okay. Morgan from Washington, D.C. asks, do your poems randomly pop into your head, or do they take a long time to write out?
It depends on the poem. sometimes what I'll have is like just one line and nothing else. And I'll just go on and do a bunch of stuff, and months and weeks to go by, and I'll hear the line again and I'll be like, but there's something else, and more will come. So that's when I start to write down the next piece. And so it takes what it takes. I don't know how long it's going to take, but some of them, are just a line. It's just an insight. It's not a poem necessarily. It's just a phrase of something that I needed to hear, that I heard, and gave me a little bit of energy and made me feel like something positive in that moment. And I wanted to share with y'all. But for other ones, it would take a long time sometimes. So, or it would take a loss, or it would take a joy. It would take some things.
Well, this is probably going to be a hard one to answer. So this is from Sarah from Oakland, California, that asks, what's your biggest accomplishment?
Wow.
Straight from the audience.
Yes, that is very hard. I don't know. There's been so many amazing things that have happened that I just enjoy them all. And I think I'm still like working on some things. And really, I think, the biggest one is get to wake up every day and use my time being a creative. Because I remember when, for the first decade of my adult life, I worked many jobs, and I would write in my journal hours that okay, I need to work from 10 till 7, and that's going to give me this much money, and that's going to pay off this, and that. And then from 7 to 7:30, I can get in quick yoga practice. From 7:30 till 7:40, I can play guitar. From 7:40 to, I broke the day down, and I put in little pockets of creativity in my day. But now, and my dream then was to have the time. We're always, as artists, we're balancing money and time. And I think what artists really need is time. And so when my body broke, it stopped working. It forced me to stop working. And I put all my time towards my creativity from that point forward. And I haven't gone back. It opened up doors when I stopped putting my energy towards my day jobs and I just focused my energy on my creativity. Then the doors just started opening. But I don't know, would have just taken that leap to focus on being creative. I probably wouldn't have. It took me having this body shut down to stop and to say, I physically can't get out of the bed, so I can't go to work. But I wouldn't have put creativity first. I wouldn't have. But now that I have, I enjoy planning my day around being creative. And this many hours I'm going to play banjo, this many hours I'm going to play guitar, this many hours I'm going to draw, this many hours I'm going to work in the garden, and this is all around everything else that they got me doing, which I'm joyful about all of it. But, that's an accomplishment to me. I don't know how long I'll be able to do it. None of us really know unless you're totally set. But I'm doing it now, and I needed that in my life,
Well, that's an amazing accomplishment. So, all the steps you take to build your dreams and to manifest the life that you want to live. And I think it's a great inspiration to people everywhere. So thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for the fantastic questions. It's been a great conversation tonight, and I'm so excited for all of you to get your copy of Maps for the Modern World. You can see the link on the screen and get your signed copy. Valerie's going to be signing.
I'm signing them.
It's so pretty.
And she loves the feel of a marker and a number 2 pencil. So I'm sure it's going to look beautiful. So if you haven't ordered your copy, please get one now. And before we wrap up, I just wanted to turn it over to Valerie to see if she wanted to say any last remarks or read a poem or sign for us or anything you want to do, Valerie.
Well, I just want to thank you, Amanda, so much for making time tonight, and you too, Adia, for making time. I really appreciate it. And thank you to the audience and to Live Signing and Andrews McMill. I'll read just something sweet to close us out. And it's the very last poem. And I do think that if we have this in our minds that we want to think this way when we get ready to head out into the world each day, then we're going to create some sweet little seeds along the way of kindness. So it's called Giving. And it's simply a line, it's an insight. It says, every time you step out the door, be ready to be of service. And she's got all these gifts in her hands, and she's ready to share the gifts she came to the earth with. So I hope y'all do it.
Well, that's great advice to leave us all with. We love you, Valerie. Congratulations on all of your successes, and thank you for Maps for the Modern World. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Adia, for co-hosting this conversation, and Valerie for being a radiant light in all of our lives.
Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful night.